Hey, Linda.
Hey, James.
Sure. Well, thanks for the reminders. I mean, it's sitting right here beside me. I know that there's a deal at the VA. Yes.
All right, y'all about ready to get going? Yep.
Ready.
All right, well, let's get the introductory stuff out of the way, shall we?
Please.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the October 28th, 2020 meeting of the BAR Large via Zoom. My name is Jay White. I am the acting chairman. Other board members that are present this afternoon are James Metters, Leon Scott, and Luda Subchuk. We have two city staff that are present, Lawrence Courtney and Linda Bennett. The order of the meeting will be as per our tradition, whereas we'll have an introduction or overview of the project by city staff to the board and for the public, followed by a 10-minute, if possible, applicant presentation. Additional time can be granted to the applicant if desired, but we'd like for you to clear that with the chair prior to that. We try to keep those within 20 minutes. And after that is concluded, there'll be any questions of the applicant by the board or staff. Any and all presenters who speak during that period should clearly state your name for the record. Anybody that is affiliated with the project, whether you be an owner, developer, designer, consultant, or otherwise, should speak during this portion rather than the later period for public comment. After the applicant presentation will be followed by an equivalent period of time for public comment. The applicant will not directly respond to public comment during that period, but any member of the public that does speak, please clearly state your name again for the record. That will be followed by city staff comments and a recommendation, which would be followed by a 5-minute period for the applicant to respond to both public comment and city staff comments. That would be a period for you to clarify or otherwise address anything that comes out of public or city staff comments. Once that period closes, it'll be time for the board to discuss and vote. And at that point, no one from the public or from the team of the applicant will have an opportunity to speak unless called on by the chair. We have no deferred items on our short agenda tonight. And please remember to limit your comments to the purview of this board, which is really the architectural design of the project, not its zoning, not any concerns over livability, traffic, or otherwise. So with that, Mr. Courtney, we shall proceed to talk about how to conduct a meeting via Zoom. If you're reading this, you've already figured it out. So, but I will highlight that public comment is restricted to those people who have approached the city to request an opportunity to speak by noon today. It won't really be possible due to the format of the meeting for anybody who has not already signed up to speak to take an opportunity to do so. All right, next. Okay, so the protocol, staff is obviously controlling the slideshow, and that slideshow includes anything that was submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with our submittal requirements. If you're the applicant or presenter, you'll need to ask staff to advance the slides on your behalf. Everyone that speaks, before you speak, please state your name, just again for audio clarity for the record. For attendees, your videos and microphones have been disabled. And attendees, if you are to address the board, will only be given the ability to speak when you're called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. And then a few more notes about public comment. The applicants and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to speak on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. And just as in in-person meetings, all applications heard today are part of a public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting until the completion of the item you've commented on. You never know what's going to happen. Staff will call on registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand via Zoom will not be called on. All right, board members. Board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on the motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor, just for clarity. The chairman shall reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if that person has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, that board member will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, we'll call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until we're ready to return to the regular meeting. I really don't anticipate that happening. Staff will issue meeting results including their comments and the board motion to the applicant following the meeting. The results will also be posted on the city website. All right, and just as a reminder, these proceedings are being recorded via the Zoom platform.
And thank you very much, Mr. White. Ms. Bennett, I think Mr. White is going to recuse himself now. So if you would temporarily remove him from the meeting, Mr. Meadows will assume the role as chairman in his absence temporarily.
Thank you, Lawrence. If you want to move forward with the introduction of the project.
Okay. As Mr. White and Mr. Meadows indicated, I am Lawrence Courtney. I am the staff architect with the planning department, and I'd like to welcome you all here and especially say thanks to all the board members for being here as well. Agenda item number 1 is 295 Calhoun Street. They are requesting approval for demolition of an existing building on that site. It is not rated. It is in Charleston Village. It is circa 1963. It's in a 7-story height district in the old city district. And some context slides. It's right off of Calhoun and Halsey Street. And that tidal pond is right behind the site, just south of the site. This is the front view looking from Calhoun. This is the west elevation here, which you don't really see much of. This is the view from Halsey and Calhoun, basically. And this is the view across the street at Roper Hospital. So with that, we will turn it over to the applicant, Mr. Long. If you would let him in, Ms. Bennett, that'd be great.
Yes. Good evening.
Evening. I think we just lost you. Mr. Long, you are muted.
There we go. I'm muted now.
Okay. Yeah.
Good evening, members of BAR and staff, and Lawrence, thank you for the introduction. Also, thank you for meeting out yesterday to tour this building. We are applying today simply to develop the building, and this is, as Lawrence said, is a building built in the 60s, 1-story building, and we are demolishing with the intent to come back before this board again in a few months with plans for a new development here. So again, simply a demolition request today. I don't want to, I don't really have anything else to add from what Lawrence described of the building. It was originally a geriatric hospital and most recently was occupied by MUSC, who we purchased the property from. It was kind of back office and administrative office, and they have vacated earlier this year. They vacated the property. So again, we just intend to demolish and come back before this board in a few months with plans for a new development. Thank you for your consideration today.
Thank you, Mr. Long. Is there any public comment?
James, there's no public comment.
No public comment. Lawrence, staff comments?
Okay, now I am unmuted. Thank you. Okay. Go to staff comments. Well, this is one of the first facilities of its kind in Charleston. The building is typical of many similar institutional buildings of this period with no special character defining features. As always, we ask the applicants to salvage materials as possible for use elsewhere. And with that, we recommend approval of this demolition.
Thank you, Lawrence. Jason, is there anything that you wanted to add?
I don't think so. We did speak to Lawrence yesterday on site about the potential to salvage brick, and we are looking into and are interested in doing that where and if possible, and not for use on the new structure, but maybe for pavers or use elsewhere, assuming that it's able to be done.
Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Board discussion.
This is Leon Scott. I'm perfectly fine with staff recommendation.
Thank you, Leon. Luda, you may be muted, Luda. I think you're still muted. Luda, I think you're still muted. I think we're still muted, Luda. Let's hold. We'll wait just a minute. Yep. Okay.
Luda, you may want to try logging in, logging out, and logging back in.
Okay, I think you're on. Yep, we got you now.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'm in support of the approval for demolition.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion?
I will. This is Leon Scott. I'll make a motion for approval of the.
Leon's made motion for approval.
Luda, Sobchuk, I will second that.
Luda has seconded Leon's motion. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call the roll. Leon, Scott?
Yay in favor.
Luda subject,
Yay, in favor.
and this is James Metters, yay, in favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Bennett, if you would let Mr. White back in, he can now resume his role as chairman, and thank you, Mr. Mathers.
You bet.
I'm back.
Okay. Agenda item 2 is 480 East Bay, which the board saw recently. They are requesting preliminary approval for the renovation of the eastern portion of the building and construction of a new plaza along the north portion. It is not rated. It's in no discernible neighborhood. The buildings are circa 1944 through 51 and post 1955 in the old and historic district. Some context photos here. Parcel lies in between East Bay on the west and Washington Street on the east, in between Calhoun and Charlotte, just about mid-block. This is from East Bay looking east. This is the portion of the building which is being largely renovated. Plaza area is out in front where these vehicles are now. Previous motion was for conceptual approval back in September. Board comments were, one board member said that they liked the approach of the design, that it was a nice uplift of utilitarian buildings. The sun shading devices or sails are in the same level as the existing canopies, and there was a question about how to reconcile that, which I think Mr. Which I think Joe answered to everyone's satisfaction. Sculptural element is a plus for the plaza. It was noted, and there was a question about adding trees in the parking area, and Mr. Schmidt said that they really could not lose parking spaces, but that there was a plan to plant palms along East Bay, and but that they could not lose spaces. Another board member appreciated the sentiment of the tower that basically mimics the one across the street, and mentioned if the goal was for a 5 to 10-year plan, that was understandable. Mentioned that the building is prominent, agreed with staff, liked the sales, but not sure that the application is right in this context. Had a little mixed feeling about the sales here, but was overall glad that the site and buildings were being improved. Another member said that building typology doesn't really belong here, but is being improved and refreshed, and that they understood the economic context at play here. They were fine with the proposal, and that it does no harm to historic building fabric or the district or the city. Another board member said, "Well done, it looks good." And another board member added that the approach to addressing boring buildings like these is done quite often. I think she mentioned it in European cities, and that it could be replaced in future and was supportive. Just to clarify, staff comments were not included in the board motion and therefore are not applicable here.
Okay.
And so with
Applicant
that,
presentation.
we'll let the applicant.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Schmidt, Evanson Schmidt Architects. I trust you can hear me this time.
Yes.
Perfect. As Lawrence concluded, there was no, as we went through the whole project, the ultimate resolve was there were no restudy issues required. So what we did is we proceeded with additional detailing, additional refinements, as you would expect as a project's coming along. The only actual change to the drawings that's not a refinement was on the south side facing Calhoun Street in the back courtyard. We've added yet another storefront to that location in anticipation of it becoming, it would be down there behind that dumpster on the bottom picture. We've added an actual store. The building will look quite much nicer than this, thank you. If you could go to the drawings, that might help. We really designed this. If you could just get to the drawings. Keep going.
Somewhere behind the dumpster. Keep going, Lawrence.
I'm sorry. Yes, so I think you're going to have to go back 1, 2 now. One more. Okay, now it's actually pretty much you can see previous and current. Look over to the left behind that iron stair. You can see there's a window and a door. If you look up top, there was just a door. We've added more storefront back there. Other than that, there really is no exterior architectural changes. So if you don't mind, let's go back to the courtyard area. I'm sorry, the plaza area. What we're doing here with the sails, we did adjust the sails. We got more angle. There was a comment from Luda, which we agreed that they were very flat and low, and we were able to get more angle out of them. We also have simplified it down to a single color, which we presented, which is a warm brown, which will go very well with all the other colors, making sure that we don't get into something that's too, we want it to be festive and fun, but this is an urban setting. We don't want it to get too carnival, if you will. So we've made those changes and we've submitted the color samples for it. We have simplified the metal canopy. If you want to go to the details, the actual detailing on the canopies, we've simplified that, and we have more of a standing seam roof on it and made them not so heavy looking. If you could just get to all the detail sheets, because that's where most of it. If you want to hold there, we can do that. We have detailed the post for the canvas awnings. As you can see, working with a structural engineer, we actually had to beef up the mast to be a 5-inch instead of before it was 4. And all the diagonal pieces became unnecessary in the design for the overturning moment for that. So what we did is we said, but we don't want to lose that. We thought it was an interesting concept, and that is much lighter gauge metal. And the closest concept I can give you, and actually we may be studying actually using them, is the way you would connect chain link fence poles. That kind of hardware works fine, and that's about the size of the gauge of that metal. It's only about 1.25 inches or so. It's totally non-structural. It just fits the whole concept that we sort of laid on the table before, that we have to get the posts up and we're near the water. Let's have a little fun and make them like sail masts. The tower is modified from before. We got rid of the extraneous items on the top that actually made it look like they might have been some kind of communication tower, but we wanted the look, so we completed it with just a triangular top up there, so it was more complete. The signage was discussed before. Haven't figured out how exactly to do that. We hope something can go on there to help identify the site, but as Lawrence, I believe said before, that'll go to signage review. For myself, it doesn't matter whether there's a backing on it or not. If we can get a heavier face metal on there so that the actual read, then you wouldn't need the field to actually apply it to. But the landscape, I don't know, you have not found the metal awning detail, so let's try that. There you go. So this is a different variation than was there before. We think it's a lot more comfortable and fits the building better. This also I'm sure there's another detail, but this is good enough. The header for that opening is the same as the header for all the new windows, correct? It will be an inset I-beam, 2 inches inset with a filler plate on each end, and that's how we're doing all the window and door lintels in the building. We're in an industrial area. We're in an area that looks like this building can handle it, and we think it's an attractive way to handle it because most of these are very large openings. So we're having to use a lot of steel in this to create that because this is unreinforced 3-cell CMU. So it takes a heavier lintel to support that weight when we cut it out. Those are actually little mini trusses sitting on the I-beam. I believe they're on 4-foot centers. And then, like I said, that is a standing, it'll be a snap lock, but a standing seam metal roof on it. And I think that'll come off very well. Landscape wise, I apologize. We have COVID, everybody has their issues. The landscape drawings did not show up at our office on time, so they did not make the submittal. We do have them now, but it was discussed with the staff that it could no longer be put on there. I will reiterate what we discussed before. the concept is to remove the crepe myrtles that are along East Bay Street and substitute 16-foot tall stable palms. There are 5 of them going down that run. At the ground level, the landscape architect has chosen to use very coastal landscaping, which is very appropriate. We're that close to the waterfront, even though we're not. So the majority of it is planted in sweetgrass, coral drift rose, lily of the Nile, ginger lily, agapanthus, loropetalum, and about a half a dozen plants that I have no idea what they are, but they're just more at a ground cover level. We are not able to insert landscape islands into the lot because, as we said before, we are giving up 11 parking spaces here to be able to create this great plaza, and we cannot afford to lose any more spaces, or zoning kicks the project out because of their situation with the parking ratio to the building that we're not expanding. We have to meet what was there. So again, like we've submitted all the colors. The plaza is in a tan brick paver. The runways going to the plaza are in a darker red paver, which go up to the, do you have the actual color sample sheets in this or not?
I don't believe so, Joe.
Okay, what you see running vertically there is a dark red brick, and what you see going horizontally, the lines across in the field, is a tan brick. The retaining walls for the sails and the tower are stucco on concrete, and we painted the same color as the building, which is a light tan, and the caps on the planters and the tower well are cast concrete in a buff color. The awnings, the sails that we're doing are a darker brown. The building colors aren't going to be changing. They will remain as they are. And with that, I will entertain any questions.
Okay, great, thank you. Any questions from the board or from staff?
Lawrence, do you have the previous landscape drawings, or do we have drawings in this package that Joe sent that has colors on it, or were they just not sent?
We got them after the.
I got you. That's what Joe. That's what you were talking about earlier. Okay, I got
That's correct. Correct.
I got it.
Any other questions?
I have none.
Right, well, it appears we have no public comment on this application. Is that correct, Lawrence?
I
That is correct.
believe that's right. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence. You sound different. All right, we'll go on to city staff recommendation.
Okay. Okay, staff comments. For the sake of clarity, again, it is noted that staff comments were not included in the board motion, and therefore are not applicable here. The project is essentially the same as before, with differences that Joe mentioned while being further developed. The tower feature has become a more formalized obelisk shape, which seems to us to be in contrast with the more whimsical nature of the plaza features, and staff recommends the initial asymmetrical form of the original tower design. And with that, we recommend final approval with staff and board comments with final review by staff.
Thank you. Any response from the applicant?
We could be fine with the tower either way. We actually thought this was the better way to handle it because as we discussed before, we actually are trying to generate we're treating it as a sculptural item, and why is it here? And of course, as we discussed, the nature of this is the family site, as was across the street with Channel 5, and the reckoning back to anybody questioning also the Gateway Center. What is that spire up on top of the building? We have no problem with generating interest and questions. Our concern was that it actually looked like some kind of shortwave radio tower or whatever instead of something more structural, and that it might be dangerous as far as electronic signals or anything silly like that. So we said, why not make it just a little bit, dumb it down and actually make it look a little neater and trimmer. And for those who didn't understand it has anything to do with communication, it still looks like a piece of sculpture and not utilitarian. So that was our thought, but we're open to whatever the board would like.
Thank you. Board discussion.
So Jay, I'll go. This is James. I like the new tower. I appreciate that effort, Joe. And I need some coaching, Jay or Lawrence or Linda. You know, when we're given conceptual approval, and as we've discussed, I mean, my personal opinion is we should give this conceptual approval, but I also think it's important for us to either not get plans that aren't complete with what's supposed to be in the plan to get conceptual approval. So it not be put on the list if it doesn't have what needs to be, or I need some help kind of thinking about that. I don't know if it's part of what should be in a conceptual plan for approval as a requirement. I don't know.
Yeah, well, from a technical perspective, so the applicant's seeking preliminary and staff is recommending final. Without the site drawings, there is a gap in the submittal requirements. And you know, the requirements are, even though it says requirements, they are at our discretion. It really depends upon the scale and scope of the project. Is what we want to do. It doesn't automatically eject a proposal that they lack certain elements of the submittal requirements, but it is something that we should take under consideration depending upon what level of concern we had over the site development at the previous stage of review.
Thank you.
This is Luda Sobchuk. I think the landscaping, for us to see the landscape design is important, particularly here when we have such a big open parking space. So I do not know if we can subdivide, give the approval, preliminary approval to the building, but maybe we need to see the landscaping once it's done. But that's, I do not know if, again, that's a guidance we need to get if that's doable.
We can grant approval of what was submitted so far with deferral of what's missing. That's totally at our discretion.
Okay.
Or we can deny everything. It's just really whatever we feel like.
Well,
please don't do that.
maybe it would be nice and clean and neat just to say preliminary approval with staff and board comments, accepting, it sounds like item C for staff comments, and then it comes back for final.
And item C was the landscape portion, is that right?
No, it was the tower.
Oh, okay. Ludo, you were saying?
Well, I'm asking if Lawrence suggests that final approval will be not just to staff, but to board.
Yes,
Because
yes,
of landscape.
that's what I'm.
That's what you're asking, yeah, okay.
Yes, I'm saying that lacking landscape drawings, then a good way to approach it is that it's now in for preliminary approval. So all you're doing is saying, Joe, fine, you get preliminary. Next time it comes back, make sure that you've got landscape drawings as well.
Any other comments from the board or?
I have no comments. I'm in agreement. I'd like to see the landscape as well.
Let's, do we have a motion?
One more thing, if I may, Luda,
Mhm.
Sobchuk. Again, the tower, I think the tower got too simplified. It's kind of predictable suddenly, so I don't know if we want to see a third reiteration of it, but that's just my opinion. It's just, you could see those, I think, all over. And the previous one had a little bit more interest in it and more connected to the musical theme which you have in this project right now.
So Jay, I'll make a motion
Sure.
for preliminary approval with staff comments with the exception of C.
Okay, so that's a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments, accepting staff comment C.
Yes.
Is that accurate? Okay. All right. Do we have a second for that?
I'm sorry, so do we not add that final approval to board? Should we add that?
It's automatic based on that motion.
Okay.
It would automatically come back to us unless we specifically unless we specifically indicate that it's final review by staff. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just was staff recommendation, so that's why I'm trying to clarify. All right, sorry.
Yeah. So do we have a second?
This is Leon Scott. I will second.
Okay, so we have a motion for preliminary approval with staff comments, accepting staff comment C. Ms. Sobchuk, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor?
All right. Mr. Scott.
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Metters.
Yay, in favor.
And chair votes likewise. Motion carries 4-0.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now on to our last item, agenda item 3, which is 194 Cannon Street, the hotel portion of the project for which applicant is requesting conceptual approval for new construction of a 175 room hotel. It is in no discernible neighborhood. It's in an 85/125 foot height district in the old city district. Some site context photos. It's in between Spring and Cannon at the crosstown. Haygood is right here, and you'll see in the drawings that Haygood is planned be extended through here. This is the old Wendy's looking north from Cannon. This is looking south from Spring. This is looking at 10 West Edge, the hotel there, 22 West Edge behind that, and the MUSC office building here across Spring Street. And this is looking east at the parking deck for MUSC here. Previous motion was deferral of scale and architectural direction with staff and board comments. Board comments were project has matured but is not ready for conceptual approval considering prominence of its location. Principles were applied, but officially with no association with local precedents. A board member agreed that there is improvement, but there needs more refinement, and disagreed that there is a high quality experience at the pedestrian level. It was noted that by that member that it did not harmonize with other buildings in its site context, that it did not reinforce the character of Charleston. They did not support conceptual approval, but agreed that it was moving in the right direction. A third board member agreed with the essence of the other comments. Staff comments were in two parts. Generally, we indicated that due to the prominence of the site, that this building is deserving of the board's highest level of scrutiny. Since the previous submittal, the design has improved significantly, but this architectural expression still needs further refinement. As previously noted, the building's height and disposition have been predetermined by its zoning classification as a planned unit development. Also, previous staff comments included that the facade design should be further unified and simplified throughout, integrating the smaller masses with the larger mass. The window and wall system, as illustrated on framed demonstration drawings on A.17, needs further refinement to simplify these recesses and protrusions of elements. The relationships of the planes of the elements need to be studied, and renderings should be shown accurately depicting the depth and the shadow lines of the exterior walls. as stated in principles, thicker walls with deeply set windows are more appropriate in Charleston to better fit in with the language of its more significant and larger masonry structures. Regarding treatment of the base, the facade's wide vertical grid elements should retain their width all the way to the ground where shown, visually transferring the mass of the building to grade. This tectonic expression should apply to both primary and secondary masses. And we ask that the applicant simplify the material palette, which was at that time showing aluminum storefronts, metal panels, extruded aluminum frames, curtain wall glazing, sintered stone, perforated VTAC screens, as well as wood. And our recommendation at that time was deferral of the general architectural direction. And with that, we will turn it over to the applicant.
All right, well, thank you, Lawrence, and thank you for the board for joining us this evening. I'm Jeffrey Rendering with LS3P. Lawrence, I think if you could advance a couple slides for us here.
Sure.
Appreciate that. But yeah, just building off of what Lawrence just spoke about, the comments, over the last couple of months, we really dove into the study again and been working with the city. We've had several conversations with Lawrence and his team, as well as the historic groups, and got a lot of great feedback and collaboration with those groups. And so what you'll see tonight is built from that. And generally, we were kind of asked to address a couple of the main topics, comments that we received last time, being simplifying the massing and unifying the facade design, including that integration of the rooftop. And so you'll see as we dive in that the massing has been simplified to express a more pure form, and the rooftop is an extension of the facade design, where before it felt a little bit lifted and dropped into place. The material palette has also been restudied to reflect more of the larger downtown buildings in Charleston here. And lastly, but probably most importantly, is to activate and create that high quality experience at the pedestrian level. And you'll see throughout the presentation here, the extensive rework that we went into the program to really shift spaces around to make a more inviting ground floor. So on this slide here, since our last presentation, really some more news came out about the West Ashley Bridge, the pedestrian bridge that is being planned. And since we had installed that, we had this great opportunity to kind of step back and relook at our greater context of where our site is, and to really build off of that energy that bridge will bring to the downtown area and hopefully to our site. And the goal really is to draw those pedestrians and those bicyclists up and through our site into that new Haygood extension that will connect you into West Edge, connects you to the south into the MUSC district and the medical district, but also into the retail that's going to be coming in our garage, but also the future developments of the area of our project. If you can go to the next slide, Lawrence. So, again, taking a step back and looking at our previous submissions, we had this challenge from the very start of designing a building on an island. It's a four-sided building where every facade is going to be highly visible to vehicle traffic, but also pedestrian traffic. And so how do you incorporate and how do you activate the ground floor when you do have a heavy kind of back of house, heavy private program project? And so the first two submittals, we kind of had this L-shaped building approach, but it really kind of created an impediment on the park. And so in the new design, we really wanted to simplify, again, that building and the building form and plan, but to really build off the energy of the park and the West Ashley Bridge. Next slide, Lawrence, thank you. So if you draw your attention to the left side of the screen here of the ground floor activation, the diagram, you'll see that first two submittals, the top and the middle one, where the white is shown as activated space, the black is the private back of house space. And you can see how heavy it was on that L-shaped portion of the building. And so this really kind of created kind of a negative effect to what we were trying to accomplish with the park. And then at the bottom, you'll see the new proposed design. We relocated a lot of that program, a lot of that private program, and moved it up the building into the second floor. This allowed us to create more public space on the ground floor, more areas that we can add fenestration and connection to the street along the north of Spring. We also brought the fitness center down and placed it to the west side along the park to help activate that area. And then again, to the east at Haygood, you know, that lobby stays the same, that double height space will stay the same in that location. But you can see how our plan became more of this simple bar element. And by relocating that program, you'll see in the site plan there, right in the middle is a little gray kind of hatch area. The lower wing, that L-shaped portion kind of reshifted and became more of a bar again, but it was lifted up, allowing the park to continue underneath the building and through our site. If you can move to the next slide. So here's a section at that Spring Street side at the north. And we wanted to kind of explore a couple options of how to handle the sidewalk condition at the building. You know, we were kind of advised that in this area that we should have our ground floor elevation at 9 feet. However, the grade in this area ranges from 6.5, 7 feet at the high side, all the way down to about 5 feet at the park area. So how do you kind of deal with a sidewalk that is such a varying height from the ground floor inside the building? And so we kind of landed on the top design here. You'll see having a landscaped area between the sidewalk and the vehicle traffic in the street to create that softened buffer, but also a smaller landscape area from the building from the pedestrian as well. This has seat walls and areas for the pedestrian to engage, but it does provide a little bit of a space, so you're not kind of awkwardly looking in at a lower level and looking up at people inside the building, which is the option kind of on that bottom image there. But this is one area we've received a lot of comments from the historic groups and from Lawrence and his team. So this is one area we would love and invite your feedback on as we move forward. Next slide, Lawrence. So here's looking at the corner at the Spring and Haygood extension. This is a great opportunity to hit a home run on this project to add a secondary recessed entry. And that really captures all the pedestrian traffic that's coming from the west edge and really moving back and forth across the Haygood extension. With the grade difference here, we were able to create a nice raised terrace area, an opportunity for pedestrians to kind of engage with the building and to get away from the traffic around them. Next slide. And then we want to kind of take a step back here now and look at the overall massing and the changes that occurred. You'll see at the first middle on the far left, you know, the building was kind of dark and ominous. We stepped down the massing at the tower side of the Spring Street side. And then on the second submittal, we really try to lower the height of the building and became a little bit more timid, I guess, with the overall scale. But we were trying to kind of hide and conceal that with a stepped massing. However, you know, the comments we heard from the board, from the city architect, that this was confusing and that the massing really needed to be simplified. So as you see in the new proposed design, that pure tower form being proposed along the street. The kink in the building was also removed and straightened out to simplify the facade and the massing in as well. Next slide, please. So here's that zoomed in look at the Spring Street. The overall brick facade kind of gives way to a metal and glass curved corner that really emphasizes the entrance below, but also connects that entrance up through the building and into the rooftop, and it's integrated in the same materiality of glass and metal. Do I want to talk about this? Okay, let's move on to the next slide there. And then over here at Haygood, again, you can see how the massing was simplified. The step down portion of the left image there was removed, and the tower became clear in this form. The top floor was also, we did receive a lot of comments during our design dialogue and conversations with the city and with the historic groups about the top floor. And so we wanted to make that feel as an integral part of the facade design. And so it's an extension of that window wall. Next slide, please. So looking at that close, you can see how the glass and metal corner become a beacon to the pedestrians at the west edge. And it seamlessly connects the top floor. And so at the top floor, we, in order to really lighten the visual appearance of it, we introduced double columns and separated those with glazing. This really lightens that top floor and creates a great beacon at the top. A more prominent brick cornice was introduced at the 4th floor, and again at the 10th floor, the top of the brick facade. Next slide, please. Here's a little zoom in of that facade that we just looked at. You can see here how the material palette was simplified. So we have brick and metal panel. So we are proposing a stitching of bronze, a lighter bronze and a darker bronze metal at the window fenestration to again help the windows and the recesses to appear a little bit lighter. We have a layering, a stitching effect of that metal through alternating floor lines with metal and brick. And we also revisited the module bay of the openings. And this allowed us to reduce the BTAC grill width. So if you remember from the previous design, we were around 42 inches in width of that BTAC grill. And so by redesigning, we were able to kind of hide part of the mechanical equipment behind the brick wall. And that allowed us to reduce all the way down to 30 inches in width, which is the minimum we can get to on those screens. And we also have created additional depth at the windows. So the window itself is about 14 inches deep from the face of the column, of the brick columns. And that's done in 2 layers. So as you can see, the stacked brick detailing at the side bands of the window is about 8 inches back from the column. And then the window is set 6 inches addition to that. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So here's a view coming over from West Ashley and the bridge. And so you can see the translation of the first 2 really kind of appeared the same in massing, where we were taking the lower tower, the lower wing of the building, and kind of concealing the tower form. But as we kind of mentioned earlier, the direction from you all and the city staff, and really the historic groups, it became confusing and wasn't a cohesive design. So we looked to separate out those 2 towers, the 2, I guess, wings, and have be their own kind of distinct compatible structures. And this allows the tower to read clearly and allows the lower mast to read clearly. Next slide, please, Lawrence. So we really worked hard to ensure that the lower wing would sit in juxtaposition to the tower and would be a more contemporary expression of the same design moves. It has the same material palette, again, that combination of the lighter and darker bronze in the fenestration. And the massing of that lower wing also plays well with the context of the MUFC garage and our garage, and creates kind of a level height and scale, and creates that beautiful gateway as you enter through the city. At the rooftop in this end, the rooftop glazing gives way to an open air roof terrace at the west end, and this has great views to the north and to the south, and obviously to the west at the river there. And it's done with this nice, elegant double column colonnade. Next slide, please. And here, as we approach from the Lockwood on-ramp below, again, you can see how separating out the 2 masses really simplified the massing and also help the two moves read clearly and not be as confusing. And then the lower wing starts to really engage that park. If you go to the next slide, we're going to look at this guy one more time, even closer up. But you can start to see here how that lower wing was lifted off the ground, and the park is able to just flow right beneath. And the next slide, please. So here's that zoomed in money shot of that park and the opportunity that we were able to do here. So in the lower left of that image, you can see the deep recesses at the storefront at the ground floor. And those two on the left there are the fitness centers. So that really engages the park, maybe an opportunity for people to bust out of the building there and to actually use the park for fitness and to engage it really with pedestrians. Also the sidewalk that is part of the park, then kind of typically right now it moves back to the street edge. We're suggesting let's pull that sidewalk off the street front and move it underneath the building, really drawing the pedestrians to engage with our site, but also creating that nice buffer zone from vehicular traffic. Let's move to the next slide. So here's a section through that lower wing that we just looked at, just to kind of give you an idea of the height that we have there. So the minimum height we're proposing is going to be 12 feet at that wing, and it will kind of range, it will grow in height as the buildings, as the landscape kind of slopes back down to grade. And then to the left there, you can see the lower rain garden buffer that merges underneath our building as well. And also, it is a great opportunity to kind of really look at the window depth. So you can see in the section, well, I'm using my mouse, you can't see my mouse, but the section to the right of that hyphen, that glass, the predominantly glass hyphen from the lower mast to the taller tower, you can see the depth of those windows. And then again at the tower, or the lower wing itself, the windows are set back 8 inches. Thanks, perfect, that's great. So you can see how those windows there are set back 8 inches from the face, the outward face of the metal panel. And then at the tower, it's 14 inches. Thanks for zooming in, Lawrence, appreciate that.
Welcome.
Next slide, please. So here's a view, again, a zoomed in view of the entry at the motor court, at the courtyard. So this will be one of the main entries in addition to the curved corner entry. So here we have that elevating level of detailing, that higher level of detailing than the upper floors. So you can kind of see from this rendering, we have a nice water table that has been denoted by recessed brick, and then below that is all vertically stacked brick. Along and around the windows, we also have a brick recess and a metal panel frame that frames out the storefronts themselves. And storefronts are double height, and you can see the differentiating mullion pattern at that second floor level. So as we mentioned before, that program that got lifted up is in a mezzanine-like second floor. And so we're areas where we don't have that program. So on the south here and east side, those are all going to look into the lobby in double height. Yeah, we also have reveals in those columns up to the base cornice, and that allows grounding of contemporary linear lights to kind of help denote the entrances. Next slide, please. So I think here's a great opportunity to really see that, again, that transformation of the project throughout this year, based on all your comments that we've received and comments from the town and the historic groups. So the ground floor, I think, really becomes evident, the moves that we made. It's lighter, it's brighter, it's taller, it's more proportionally to the building itself. The lightness of the lower wing compared to the first submittal is night and day. Very much more glazing, more framed-like structure, but also lifting it up makes it lightly touch the ground. And then the top, examining tops around town, we felt that it was more successful to integrate the top than recessing the top that we did in the previous 2 schemes. They felt foreign in those first 2 schemes. They felt like, again, like someone kind of flew in that top and almost like a renovation. So we felt, in our studies of the People's Building, the Francis Marion, that all those tops were integrated into the design and that was the right move for this project as well. One more slide for us, Lawrence. So just kind of rehashing on the early on. So the material palette has been simplified to brick and metal panel and obviously storefront. The base and the ground floor has really been activated at this point, and we have a lot more glazing along the north side, as you saw in the Haygood rendering, and then obviously in this rendering as well, as proportionate to the overall height. And yeah, I think we think it was a great transformation, and it was really attributed to a lot of your comments as well. So we really appreciate all the input you've had, and we look forward to continuing the conversation with you today. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you for that. Any questions from the board or staff? Okay, hearing none, let's go on to public comment. I think we have 2 people lined up to speak. Is that correct, Linda?
That's correct, Jay.
Okay, let's fire away.
If I could get Justin to unmute himself.
Sorry, I was actually dropped from the meeting temporarily. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, sure can.
Okay. So this is Justin Schwebler representing Historic Charleston Foundation. Thank you all for your time. And Jeffrey, I just want to say thank you. You've addressed some of the comments that we have here in our notes, so just bear with me as we go through this, and thank you for addressing some of those things through our dialogue. We'd first like to thank the applicant and the design team for their continued dialogue with the Historic Charleston Foundation. We believe that the design has come a long way and has undergone a drastic improvement thanks to their continued efforts. We support conceptual approval at this time, but with some comments for the design team and the board that we'd like to see fleshed out moving forward. We want the applicant to ensure that the windows will be well recessed into the facade of the building, providing a clear delineation of depth between the cladding, window surrounds, trim, and the glazing itself. We would also like to see the design team confirm the use of bronze on the structure as part of the exterior cladding. This was mentioned to HCF staff by the design team as part of the material choice for the metal panels. We feel that it's critically important to maintain a high standard of material usage in order for this design to succeed. We'd like to see greater detailing on the air conditioning VTAC systems and what materials will be used for that screening. Again, we want to stress that this is executed in a high quality material like bronze to ensure long-term aesthetic appeal and limiting maintenance issues and material failures. The detailing on the rooftop terrace needs to be addressed. We feel that the cornice of the terrace should be differentiated from that of the building, perhaps making the cornice line of the terrace lighter and incorporating some horizontal members over the patio to form a trellis. This would help to differentiate the space from the street view and provide a more finished look to the outdoor space. We would also like to see some representation of signage for the hotel. Where will the signage be located and what sort of materials will be used? Again, we thank the applicants for their hard work in making this proposal and ensuring that the Charleston gets a building held to a high standard of material application and design. And we look forward to working with them and moving forward. Thank you.
Okay. Who's next, Linda?
Erin Minigan, if she'll unmute herself.
Thanks, Linda. Erin Minigan, Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for continuing to engage us on this project and appreciate the incorporation of many of our suggestions. We feel the project is headed in the right direction and specifically feel improvements made to the activation of the ground floor, simplification of the massing, and upgrade of the material palette are all very positive moves. We've been consistently opposed to the use of the VTAC system, and though we are still disappointed to see it being used in the program, feel it is being treated more appropriately. The building still seems a bit busy, and one thing we would suggest would be to restudy the horizontal spandrel pieces between the floors. We do not find the alternating light brick and dark metal spandrels to be a successful approach, and where the light brick is used, exacerbates the appearance of the VTACs. We would recommend eliminating the brick treatment of the spandrels and using the dark metal material only, which better masks the VTACs. As mentioned, we find the ground floor level to be quite successful, but would encourage strengthening the fourth floor cornice and introducing more detail to better define the base of the building, as the cornice is currently almost at the same scale as the spandrels above it and fades into the overall rhythm of the building. Finally, we would like to request more information on the material of the mechanical screening at the roof level. As rendered, it appears almost as glazing, but in the elevation drawings looks to possibly be a louver material. Clarity on how this roof level will read would be helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. So we have two letters that I will read into the record. I'm going to paraphrase these to capture the architectural commentary as is per our jurisdiction. The first is from Mac Reese, the master developer for the West Edge project, and general partner at 22 West Edge. I'm sending this letter to provide general comments on the design of the Aloft Hotel planned to be constructed at 194 Cannon. The building design has become increasingly simple and elegant and will be compatible with 22 West Edge. A basic rectangular center core office building whose curtain wall facade, varying glass, and notched corners create a sophisticated modern design that is unique to Charleston. The improvements on the north side of the ground floor will provide an opportunity for street level activation that will promote better interaction with West Edge. Let's see, it appears that the redesign of 194 Cannon is a step in the same direction as West Edge itself, and will provide an attractive visual presence for both pedestrians and motorists as they walk and drive past the building. It is my opinion the current design of 194 Cannon should receive approval at this conceptual phase. And then next and finally, we have a letter from Michael Maher, who's CEO of the West Edge Foundation. Please accept the following responses to the recently submitted design proposals for 194 Cannon Street. As has been stated before, we concur that the redevelopment of 194 Cannon Street presents a unique opportunity to create a significant presence on an important but challenging site. This new conceptual design continues to be responsive to this opportunity. The new massing approach with the two distinctive elements is an approach that has been used successfully in many places and is being deployed here effectively. We anticipate positive response from BAR staff and the board as the design is wholly appropriate to the site and context. All right, so with that, let's move on to staff comments and recommendation.
Okay. Okay, I've broken this down into two parts: positive moves noted and areas to study. And on the positive moves, we note that the massing has been simplified, with the main body of the building being now represented as a brick-clad block. While a strict application of the principles would lead the design of this main body mass to be broken into 2 or 3 visually separate vertical masses, view corridors of this block are primarily from the east and west, where this more articulated massing would not be seen. The brick cladding of the main block has been stopped at the northeast corner to reinforce and to accentuate the curved corner in the plane of the fenestrations at the main block. This results in an interesting layering at the corner. A base has been clearly established at the 4th floor level. The smaller block to the southwest has been pulled off from the main mass and now presents more successfully as a separate structure with its own yet compatible architectural expression. The entry plaza and circulation areas along Cannon Street are nicely conceived to keep pedestrians away from traffic as much as possible. Areas to look at, again, the top cornice of the main block reads as much heavier as a much heavier component now. Staff recommends study or delighting this element. Although a base is clearly delineated at the fourth level, this base will need to incorporate a higher quality of materials or level of detailing to enhance the pedestrian experience. And while it appears that mostly storefront is being used, it is unclear what other materials might be proposed for the ground level base at the north along Spring Street. Again, this base needs to incorporate a higher quality of materials or level of detailing. Although there are two options shown on sheet A.07, staff recommends a blending of the two, and this is at the walk along Spring Street. Staff recommends a blending of their two options to allow for a wider, more maintainable verge and to provide a small space between the building and walk to soften this edge and to help ground the building. With those things said, our recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff and board comments.
Thank you, Mr. Courtney. Board discussion.
Jay?
Yeah.
This is James. I appreciate the northeast corner and the curved glazing. I believe the contrast between the brick and the bronze is significant and should be restudied. I appreciate the sidewalk as it integrates into the structure. I think that's a nice detail. I think it's important to look at the appropriate recess for the windows. I think a bronze cladding material is great. I know that it is expensive, but that gives this a very warm, long-lasting feel. The VTEC systems are always a concern. So understanding how the exterior veneer covering those is going to be installed, so access for maintenance, cleaning, staining, anything that may result from the use of those systems is anticipated now, and access for dealing with that's planned for. That's all I have.
Thank you. Anyone else? Well, I'll jump in very quickly and say that I appreciate the development that this project has undertaken. I know it's been a little bit of a long road, and I think the height, scale, and mass of the building is certainly well proportioned for this site. You know, there's there's a lot to be said for simplicity that yields to elegance, and I think this project is on that route. And the material implications of this project are really important too. A lot of people have latched on to the notion of bronze cladding for this building, and it certainly could be a really striking part of this composition, and I encourage you all to explore that, even as it might interface with the curtain wall system. It is possible to clad a curtain wall system in bronze. I've seen that done before. But I think the scale of this building and the general architectural direction of this proposal, which were our main concerns last time, those questions are satisfied. And I agree with staff comments, and I agree with the comments that James has brought forth so far.
Mr. White?
Yes.
This is Richard Gao, part of the applicant team.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really get a chance to make any kind of statement after the comments. Will you give us that opportunity?
Yes, I'm sorry, I forgot entirely to do that. So yeah, why don't you take a bite at that apple?
Okay.
I apologize.
That's okay. I do appreciate all of the input from everybody, and every time we do a project where we try to differentiate the top floor, the comment about top heaviness comes up. And I can tell you that we had no less than 30 or 40 different studies on how to make something light in terms of stepping it back and shortening it, making the components that hold it up lighter. I believe that this is an approach that we think is more Charleston than a setback kind of generic recessed cantilevered top edge like we had previously. So that's the one comment. The next one is we do anticipate having a very detailed base, and at a larger scale with more detailing in the preliminary, we would certainly demonstrate that. On the north side, as Mr. Lawrence indicated, we do expect that we would have metal panels under the windows, and of course the verge and the landscaping is still in flux, so we'll figure that out. And then, probably the biggest question that we have is the absolute misunderstanding that we intended to clad this building with bronze. As a hotel, as a building in this part of town, we I think clearly delineated as bronze in color, but bronze anodized metal, bronze anodized aluminum is a very commonly used material, and that was our intent every step of the way. We know that we had a lot of thinking to do when it came to height, scale, and mass, and that materials in of themselves are generally more considered a preliminary BAR item. And so I would say that we have every intent of making this a highly detailed building where appropriate and where we can afford it. We did, as often is asked, have we priced this building? Can we afford it? And the answer is absolutely yes. Every time we go back to this board, we have the buildings priced, but we did not include bronze cladding, just to be candid with you. We think that the depth of the windows at 14 inches is among one of the deeper masses that we've had on a project in the city of Charleston. So we feel pretty good about that. And the comments about whether the intermediary should be bronze or brick is clearly something that we could study. And it certainly would have an effect on the weight of cornices depending upon what that intermediate horizontal would be. So those are our comments, and I'm sorry that I didn't get to voice them sooner. If that it didn't change the flow of your meeting, sorry.
Thank you for that. All right, any further board discussion?
This is Leon Scott. Just quickly, I think it's certainly an improvement. It's elegant, and I really like the where you've actually raised the terrace area as well. But I think overall an improvement, and I'm comfortable with staff recommendation. That's it.
Okay. Ms. Subcheck, anything?
Hey, Jay, I'll make a motion.
Yeah, please.
I move for conceptual.
Oh, yeah, go ahead, Luda. Sorry.
I'm sorry. I got
Sorry,
muted somehow.
Oh.
Okay, so very quickly, I have not had opportunity to be in the previous meetings, but I see quite an improvement of the development of the structure from very contemporary to something which really elegant and fits the Charleston fabric. And yeah, I was surprised about bronze, but now it's understandable. And it's a nice approach, I think, to treat the metal and have it kind of historic connotation to it too. If you think about 19th century buildings of that size, I think as far as the window recess, it seems to be appropriate. All the renderings showing pretty good depths in comparison to the face of the elevation. The top floor seems to be airy, glassy. I guess the question was about the mechanical units behind. So what is the material there that needs to be approached with a caution, I guess. But other than that, I agree with most of the comments of the staff and board, and I think conceptual approval is in order.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I will make a motion for conceptual approval, incorporating comments made by each of the board members as well as the city staff, and I would also like to add to that a request that great attention gets paid to the proposed metal when it comes back to the board, because that would be significant to me, as it's going to be exposed to salt water right beside it. Thank you.
Luda, Sobchuk, I second that.
Okay, so we have a motion that's made and seconded, and let me make sure I've got this correct for the record. Conceptual approval with board and staff comments, adding a request for great attention to proposed metals on the facade, considering the environmental exposure.
Thank you, Jay.
Is that, yeah. All right, so Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
Yay, in favor.
Ms. Subcheck?
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Metters?
Yay, in favor.
And the chair votes likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you all. This concludes the meeting. You all have a good evening.
Thanks, Jay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you all.